Hi guys, welcome to Midnight Conversations with me, Ray Dark Knight. I want to start the first episode off with saying welcome to my podcast. It's nice to have you here. It's okay if you cannot listen to, or if you don't want to, or if you have conflicting opinions, you can leave them down below. You are free to do so. So today I wanted to talk about toxic love and red flags and the entire conversation around beige flags, red flags, green flags. So, personally, I have had a very close brush with toxic love, toxic relationships, and thankfully I got out of it quickly enough that I did not have to have an issue with it. Also, toxic love and relationships don't necessarily have to be romantic. They can be platonic as well, which is one of the things I really want to perpetuate more, because I feel like when you use the word love, everybody assumes you're talking about a romantic love, and that's not necessarily always true. So, toxic love, what's it about? And honestly, I know a lot of people have toxic relationships, or toxic friendships, or toxic love stories. And it's so sad that it's as common as it is, because toxic anything is essentially this relationship where one person doesn't respect another person as a fellow human being and treat them with the empathy that one deserves from another fellow human being. And it's, oh my god, it is so terrible. But at the same time, there's an entire conversation around flags. Obviously, red flags are indications of traits that a person might have, might be a toxic person who might not be good for you, or might have toxic traits that might not be good for having a relationship. Beige flags that have been recently coming around, I found out, are essentially these traits that might be a red herring or a light warning, but aren't necessarily red flags. And honestly speaking, the opposite of all this is a green flag, which is something which is a flag or which is a trait of a person where it indicates that it's a very pure relationship that is respectful, kind, loving, all the words. And when all of this conversation comes up, I find that often there's conversations around traits that are not necessarily red flags, but people just perceive it as one. Sometimes they're mild jokes, sometimes they escalate a lot higher. For example, putting cereal before milk, or putting milk before cereal. Some people might be like, oh my god, that is a serial killer thing. Which, for most and all purposes, could be considered a joke, but it could escalate a lot more than that. And I have the same opinion about red flags. For sure, when a person behaves in a disrespectful way to another person, it makes sense that you'd call it a red flag. But if it's a more skeptical situation where there's disrespect on both the ends, or where that's just how they communicate on both the ends, then calling it a red flag seems meaningless. It's how you open Reddit either. Am I the jerk? You see that they talk a lot about these situations, and most responses are immediately either, especially if they're talking about a relationship or a friendship, are either no contact, or go low contact, or just cut off, get a divorce, break up. And it's like, just because they have a certain trait doesn't always mean that it ends in that way. There's people who are quick to anger, which all in all could be considered a red flag. But the same quick to anger people might be just as quick to calm down. And anger might not always result in yelling or physical abuse or physical altercations. It might just be, oh my god, I can't believe this, and then they cool down and they can come back to you and be like, okay, now let's have this productive conversation. And so red flags, and the fact that a lot of these traits are just stereotyped into being these toxic traits is also really something that is to observe in the general society. And when this topic comes up, I feel like we often forget that people are very, very quick to stereotype things, very quick to put it in a box. Some people function that way, and that's great for those people, but a lot of people might not function that way. And we are not really okay with that. A lot of us aren't okay with not having boxes. Which is, when you think about it, it is kind of questionable because a lot of us want the freedom of that, but at the same time, we are unable to digest it. And this whole 6 minutes, I have been telling you about red flags, and it's the same way I do not understand the purpose of beige flags. And, one might argue that beige flags are just these red flag traits that might not necessarily be red flags, but they are kind of a toxic trait. Which, then again, almost everyone has a toxic trait. Not a single one has zero toxic traits. It's just how your behavior is after it. You might be addicted to a cigarette, but if you stop trying to smoke and on purpose try to fight your addiction, or that could be a terrible example, honestly, but then again, there's also situations like where you're a shopaholic, right? But you only shop cheaper items, or like small scale items that are easy to buy and you don't have to pay a lot of money. Is it really a toxic trait then? Or you really like reading a lot and you read all the time, to the point where it might end up being a toxic trait. But also you are aware of it and you're trying to curb it, or you are still very much aware of everyone around you during all of this, and you pay attention to the people when they talk. Is it really a problem? So my entire point of this conversation, which if you haven't understood, is traits might be labeled toxic for how they might result in a bad situation, but they don't always have to be toxic. A trait might not necessarily be a toxic trait just because it sounds as one. It's the same with labeling people as something and then expecting them to be a really bad person. People are not black and white, unfortunately, so aren't traits. And so I do not like the conversation around beige flags or red flags. Although it's a fun video, or it's a fun joke, or it gives you this idea of what might be something that you should take care of as traits, to call every other trait toxic, or to call certain harmless traits toxic, is quite an interesting choice, I feel like. And this is what I think. This is today's midnight conversation. It is afternoon for me though. I don't know when you'll be listening to it, but I hope you had a good day, or are gonna have a good day. And that's it for this episode. Leave your opinions down below. Feel free to dislike or like the video. That is your choice. I will be releasing more videos, so if you want to listen to the podcast more, you can subscribe and leave the notifications on. It is a choice. I'm going to try to do this weekly, but I can't give you a for surety that I will do it. So, yeah, I'll see you in the next episode.